policing has to be made accountable to the people that are policed. But this is something that we all know is a cornerstone of the democratic system. Now, if we look at the history of policing in the capitalist world, or indeed in any part of the world, it has historically been a tool for the rich and the powerful. It has been a tool that has been used to establish and maintain the status quo. And it has invariably mitigated against people, working people and people of color. Certainly in the Western world and in the developing world, it's been used as an instrument for the privileged elite to retain their privilege. I'm talking in very basic terms, but this is fundamentally what policing has been about. Here, we pride ourselves as being the oldest and the most mature democracy. We pride ourselves in being a bastion of civil liberties, where the individual is paramount in terms of the considerations of the state. And yet, we see this increasing deterioration of fundamental civil rights of individuals. And this is happening before our very eyes. I don't have to tell anyone here what has been going on. But all of us know, since 9/11, since 7/7, and even way before then, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, like some other colleagues here, of what happened in the 80s, of how young people were systematically criminalized by the police force as a matter of policy, not as a matter of accident, not as a matter of over-vigilant policing, but simply as a matter of policy. Swathes of young people across London and across Britain were criminalized by a police force that was out to destroy what they constitute, what they thought was a threat to the whatever social order that they were protecting. Now, like Georgette and like Oli, I spent the last 25 years, much of my adult life in Tower Hamlets, and one of the biggest and one of the earliest issues that we had to deal with was the way in which the police were conducting themselves in relation to Bengali youth. This is something, I mean, people have talked about street corners and tube stations, but I remember young school kids being stopped, 12, 13-year-olds, systematically being harassed by the police. I'm talking about Stepney Green School, talking about what used to be Dainford School. I'm talking about a number of major secondary schools in Tower Hamlets where there may well have been issues of social order, social disorder. There may have been fights between schools and so on and so forth. But what was absolutely clear was there was a systematic policy of criminalizing young people. Now, why should this be? Why should it be a part of state policy to criminalize young people? And I think this is a pertinent question that we asked in the 80s, we must continue to ask now. And I would put to you, the reason for this is very simple. Young people are seen as, as the people who have the potential to be the harbingers of change, to bring about change, to be radical, to be militant, to actually do things that make the establishment nervous. And that is why they've always been seen as bits of the population that need to be contained. They either need to be brought into some kind of framework that the establishment can deal with, or they need to be policed in a manner that makes certain that their militancy, that their whatever promise they have of bringing about social change is diminished and destroyed. And that, I put to you, is the situation that we faced in the 80s, and I put to you that that is the situation we still face today. As upholders of the law, the police have a huge social and moral responsibility. But we know, I've had lots of dealings with the police in lots of different ways, to be honest, and I spent some time actually training the police in terms of race awareness and so on, and I know how difficult a job that was. It was difficult not because there were individuals who were, who were sort of evil to begin with or anything like that, but it was absolutely clear to me the police as an institution, as a public service, as a body that exists because we pay taxes, that allow their existence, this is a body that is deeply, deeply racist, deeply, deeply discriminatory in its culture. I mean, this notion that there are bad individuals, there are few bad apples in the police force. This is just not the picture that I've seen. I think there are serious systemic institutional problems within the police force, and good individuals can go in and they will become corrupted. And that's what happens. When you go into when decent individuals go into a corrupt, fundamentally flawed organization, there are very few who have the strength to withhold, to kind of protect themselves from that and to retain their integrity and so on and so forth. And I've seen many, many police officers who have been decent individuals, but, surviving in a system that will make racists out of them, and indeed have done so. And this, in the context of sort of the very deep levels of youth alienation that we have, I think makes for a very explosive situation. If you consider, it's very easy for David Cameron to come up with this, point to say that we now need to give the police more powers to stop and search people willy-nilly, and we should make it easy for them so they don't have to fill in any forms, it wastes time, and so on. What then happens to the question of accountability? Other colleagues have raised this. I don't know how many of you have ever been stopped and searched by the police. It has happened to me on numerous occasions. It's happened to me, surprisingly, I'm taking my son to school in the car and I'm being stopped as a consequence of which my son is late for school and so on, and I'm stopped and I'm asked totally banal questions. And I can't figure out for the life of me what the purpose of this is. And this has happened to me on more than one occasion. And I have to say, it happens to me when I'm going to Canary Wharf or I'm going to the city. It doesn't happen to me in other parts of the town. And, and that sort of begs the question. I don't particularly sort of fit the profile of a young terrorist, I don't think, at this point in my life. But, the fact that I've been stopped as many times as I have, sort of raises a question to me. How come this is happening? I know of plenty of young people who are routinely stopped and searched, have been routinely stopped and searched, and they just take it, as an ordinary part of their lives. They have now become so immune to this whole process. There's no point fighting about it. There's no point protesting about it. Just accept it. This is part of the way in which it operates. Like you've got red lights on the streets, you've got to stop. You get a police officer to stop you. You just cooperate and get on and go your own way. The fact that there is a huge social cost to all of this is, I believe, simply not being fully recognized. To my surprise, one of the things, it's a shame that Ali Desai, who was supposed to be here from the Black Police Association, gave his apology. But I was looking at the internet, and Keith Jarrett, a chap called Keith Jarrett, who was the previous president of the BPA, he came out in support of a greater use of stop and search. And he did this on the basis that lots of black elders from various communities had approached him to say that in the context of the gun crimes going on and the killings and so on, and the knife crimes going on, that this would somehow help, this would somehow solve the problem. And, I just find it very disturbing when you have a situation where, people are trying to deal with very deep-rooted, long-term problems. The problem of the kind of black-on-black violence that we have, the problem of racial violence that we have still in this country. These are deep-rooted problems that require considered responses. You can't simply increase the level of stop and search and assume that this is going to provide some kind of a solution to this problem. Indeed, it's not. It's going to make matters much, much worse. And this idea that, you get stopped, you are invariably treated like a criminal. When you are stopped, you are treated like a criminal. There's no getting around it. The police are not people who are known for their polite conduct. They behave in an obnoxious manner. They're rude, they're hostile, they're offensive in the way in which they conduct themselves, and they treat you like a criminal. They won't tell you what it is they've stopped you for. They will do everything, in my experience, they will do everything possible to aggravate you, and the moment you get aggravated, they'll nick you. That is the kind of ploy they use, particularly with young people. Now, I'm mature enough to sort of keep my temper down, but when you're talking to a 16-year-old, or a 17-year-old, or an 18-year-old, it's not very hard to rile them up and get them to become agitated, and invariably these young people find themselves incarcerated, taken in, nicked and booked and so on. Brutal. Maybe they're let off in 24 hours or whatever it is, but the point is that these young people systematically see the police as a force that simply brutalizes them, that abuses them, that incarcerates them, and that treats them without any respect whatsoever. And I'm talking about very young school-going kids, as well as, of course, older young people. And this is a fundamental problem. How do we deal with this? The way in which David Cameron and Gordon Brown are now suggesting that all we need to do is get rid of the accountability, give the police more freedom. And what is this going to achieve? I mean, can this seriously be, a policy proposition? Can anyone suggest that this will lead to anything other than further disasters or further sort of alienation of young people? I just don't understand. Other than scoring some cheap political points for a couple of days in the media, what this purpose, what is served by this? I mean, David Cameron got a few days of press around this issue, and Gordon Brown, not knowing how to respond, simply fell in line and said, yeah, let's do this. This will help. And God knows, this is going to help because black people are killing each other, and even though we did this before, to protect black people, we now have to do the opposite to protect black people again. It's that kind of sort of warped logic that we're getting. Comrades, I honestly believe that these are the kinds of issues that we need to mobilize our young people around. We have a responsibility, I think, and I know that in Tower Hamlets a meeting is planned with young people. I would urge, us all to try and, because I honestly feel that the vast majority of young people are so alienated from this whole debate that they're not even part of the discourse. They don't even get a look in. They don't even have a platform in which to sort of express what it is that they go through on a daily basis. And that has to change, because if we want to really engage with young people and ensure that they create the political momentum that will stop this kind of nonsense from becoming reality, then we have to be able to engage with young people as we've never done before. So my plea is that we try and do that in all of us in our individual and in our collective capacities. We try and do that. We engage with young people. We recognize the level of alienation they have and they feel. That we recognize the kind of sort of brutalizing experience they've had whenever they come into contact with the police, and we do our best to support them. And I hope very much that we can take this issue up further in the future. Thank you.